We love being able to go to the different high school, colleges, middle schools to live broadcast sporting events around the area. Georgia Alabama Sports Live appreciates all the fan support, but without a presenting sponsor like Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC and Opelika, none of this would be possible. So we want to say thank you so much. Go to glennsmith.com. That is right, glennsmith.com. See all the inventory and see why people always say, get ready to smile. Thanks, everyone, and thank you to Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC for being our presenting sponsor. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Georgia Alabama Sports Live. I'm Thift Barringer alongside my partner in crime, Richard Holdridge, and we hope everyone is staying safe through the lunar eclipse that just happened. Hope when there was no anything dangerous or anything else. Hope everyone was safe. Pretty cool thing that happened. We won't really get into that, but as a person that teaches young ones, put their safety first. We didn't have PE today, which was something that we expected. They're telling you not to go outside during the eclipse. But outside of that, it's pretty cool. But, Richard, how you been, man?
Well, I've been great. I actually was up in the path of totality last week, and I actually survived the 4.8 earthquake that was in New York City. I actually didn't even feel it. Everybody was saying that they felt it. I had several people reach out to me and asked if I was okay. And we actually were driving in the Lincoln Tunnel, getting ready to just spend a day in Times Square. And earlier that day, while we were on our way to New York City, we had the earthquake.
Yeah, I mean, I know you were up there for this girls' spring break. I hope you enjoyed your family time, Richard. You've been grinded hard for us on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. I mean, none other than the 4.5, 5-hour game that you did with Kendrick and Spencer, 27-26. After that, you needed a break. I went to Legoland, had some awesome fun there. Went to Mexico Beach around loved ones. Was just an excellent week of R&R. And it's good to know that even when I take a step away, or Richard, you're not there because you're my right-hand man and you always come through when I need you. You needed a break. I took a break. And yet Georgia Alabama Sports Live continued on. Rick Beach calling the game. We talked about this last Monday. Rick Beach and Chris Gates doing Pacelli and LaGrange. And last week, Smith Station Auburn, our own Chris Gates did that. How about double headers? Noah Shelton doing the baseball with Toygar. And then Chris Gates producing and calling the game of the CVCC softball. Both teams lost both games, but we look to do many more here in the future. But this shows you teamwork makes the dream work, and we got a great team with Rick Beach, Noah, myself, you, Toygar, Chris, Robert Edmonds, and we're going to have other people that are going to want to join our team here in the near future for sure. But glad that we were able to get that R&R because now it's about to be grind time, isn't it, Richard? And
it is.
I also want to say I had an awesome time at the Food Truck Festival. Richard, you were out of town. I wanted you and the fam to come by, but Saturday was the Uptown Columbus Food Truck Festival that I've been the MC and host for the last 6 times they've done it since 2019. That was April of 2019, spring of 2019 is the first one I did, and I've done every one since. And the only time I didn't do one is because COVID, and we didn't even have an Uptown food truck. Mike Kelly was the DJ. I was doing this for PNB Broadcasting, Q107.3, KISS 99.3, our partners, Richard, that believe in what we do. Just a fun day. 30 food trucks, a lot of people, good gourmet food, excellent music, and the weather could not be perfect. Last year when we did it, it rained all morning long. Eventually the sun came out, but it was so much water and the humidity. But this year the weather could not be more perfect. Had a great time. Thank you to Uptown Columbus. Thank you to PNB Broadcasting for allowing me to do that with Mike Kelly. Richard, any thoughts you have after last week's spring break? Anything you want to say before we move on to what we have on our agenda?
Well, I'm just ready to grind.
A week You were not calling games for a week, Richard. A week. I think that was the longest you've gone without calling games. I mean, we're talking 3 or 4 days, maybe. But even when you're gone for drill, you've managed to call one game. This is the first time when you were off for like more than a week. But it was good time for you to relax and get recuperated. And it's about to be go time for playoffs in high school baseball.
Yeah, the last game that I called was with you, Thrift. It was the LaGrange Central game. Not that last Wednesday. It was 2 Wednesdays ago.
Right.
And I'm actually planning on calling an upcoming game on Tuesday, as we are going to go ahead and knock out the Jordan Red Jackets. They are going to be facing Kendrick, and that way we'll cover all the Muskogee County schools. And it's really been a lot of fun. I know that the regular season is getting ready to wrap up. We get ready for playoffs by the end of the month. But I'm ready to go back to work and get ready to grind.
We're back in it. As we said, this week is about to be Georgia, Alabama Sports Live almost every day. Of course, the show we have tonight. Tomorrow, as Richard talked about, we got Kendrick Jordan. Wednesday, we got potentially, we ain't got confirmation yet, but we hope to be in Phoenix City covering the number 1 team in the nation, the Central Red Devils, as they take on the Auburn Tigers in the area. An area play. They play back-to-back. They play each of the teams twice, 1 home, 1 away. And they usually do it, within 2 days. They don't spread it out, like play them once early in the season, once later, like in basketball. They play them back-to-back. We hope to be able to do that. We'll also have a live show on Wednesday. Special guests include maybe Damian Daniels from Columbus Lions. Tyler Redmond got back to me. He'll be coming in hot for the Masters. He wants to talk baseball. He's ready to give his predictions. I'm telling you, if you've never seen Tyler Redmond on deck, Richard, you know this. I'm not going anywhere for Braves baseball or MLB in general other than Tyler Redmond in this area. Please check out his YouTube channel. Richard, I know you're a big fan of him.
Absolutely. I know that with the Braves sweeping the Diamondbacks, really the first person that I want to hear as far as Braves information, because I'm worried about Spencer Strider. I know that Tyler Redmond would have the scoop. As soon as he finds out, he is going to break it. And I know that a lot of Braves fans are on pins and needles because of the Spencer Strider injury. But the Braves had a great weekend, even though it was very bittersweet. But, I mean, walking it off again in the opener? I mean, this is just a regular occurrence for the Braves.
I mean, they've made a lot of comebacks. I know they don't want to live by starting pitching, giving up 6 runs every time, Richard, but
no.
The comeback in multiple occasions, of course, and Sunday they just completely dominated. They got the Mets. They playing tonight. I expect them to dominate the Mets, and I honestly think the Braves are going to be so far ahead in this division here in the next couple of months. I think by June, midway through June, maybe July, Richard, I don't think it's going to be like it was with the Mets when they were up 10 games and they blew it. I don't see anyone catching the Braves. I really don't. I don't think Strider's is going to hurt us too much. I think he'll come back in the right time, and maybe this will be a blessing in disguise. We'll find some pitching depth, even though we got one of the best starting rotations in baseball. Losing Strider hurts. Many people predicted him to win the Cy Young, but I didn't want to get in the Braves yet. We'll talk about that with Tyler Redmond. But as you've mentioned, Richard, that's where we're going to get our Braves information. On Thursday, wow, you talk about games. We got CVCC baseball doubleheader, 12-3. Chris Gates will be on the call for that again, Richard. And then me and you, we're going across the river too. We're heading to Phoenix City. And guess who we're calling? The Calvary Christian Knights and the Glenwood Gators. You talk about Glenwood. I think they're playing their best baseball since last year. I'm going to be honest. This year, the way it started, they've overcome a lot of things. I think this Glenwood team is starting to hit their stride. And Calvary didn't too bad. We'll talk about them. They play in an IMG tournament that has all the top teams across the country. I thought they represented the Columbus area very well. We'll talk about that too here in just a moment. But Thursday, Calvary Glenwood. Friday, I'll be calling the Columbus Lions game, their first home opener, Richard, against Amarillo. How about that?
Yeah.
I wanted Richard to be on the pregame show. You, unfortunately, will be out of town for that. But me and Rick Beach will be heading it up. And then hopefully next Friday, Richard, you'll be back. You'll be doing game 2 with me. And then Saturday, we got CVCC softball. Guess who's calling that? Chris Gates is becoming our number 3, Richard.
He is.
Can you believe that?
Absolutely. He's doing a great job, too. I enjoy listening to him on the broadcast.
No, he's a great guy, and I appreciate him. But all that to say, we got a busy week here on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. And then coming up here in the next 2 weeks after that, regular season's done, Richard. We're about to be doing playoff baseball after April 23rd. The following week, the 29th, 30th, the GIAA starts their first round. And then I think Alabama and Georgia public schools start soon right after that, right?
Right, yeah.
And we got Harris County, Columbus. We'll talk about all these teams who are potentially – and Richard – and listen, nobody knows the high school baseball scene better than Richard Holdridge. So looking forward to hearing that, Richard. And honestly, we may be doing some LaGrange Troup County games here in the next couple of weeks too, Richard. I know you've been wanting to tackle that LaGrange area. They were gracious to us, allow us to come up there. Kevin Eckleberry says he wants us to come live stream. So, hey, we're going to take advantage of that, Richard. And just
absolutely.
This is what we do. We're expanding. We're getting bigger, and we're hoping maybe we work our way to the Opelika Auburn area as well. All right. We got all that out of the way. This is presented by Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC. Go to glennsmith.com right now for more information on to see all the inventory they have on the lot and learn why they say when you go there, Richard, what do they say?
Get ready to smile.
There we go. Richard's got that voice. You know he can do a voiceover. I can see him doing like a car commercial coming up real soon here on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. All right, let's talk about it, Rich. What happened yesterday? Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes lost to South Carolina, who finishes the season undefeated. And Dawn Salis, this is her third national championship as a coach, Richard. But it's only the first time that she's gone undefeated. I'm going to let you go first. Give me your thoughts on this. Are you about to rant? Are you about to say Iowa should have even been in it because UConn got hosed? Where are you going with this Iowa and South Carolina national championship?
Well, first of all, you got to look at South Carolina as an all-time team, that they are now the gold standard when it comes to women's college basketball because Coach Dawn Staley does a great job recruiting, and South Carolina had the depth. They play 9 deep. They even have a freshman off the bench, Tessa Johnson, who had 19 points in this game. I mean, we all know about Cardoso. She's probably going to be a top 4 pick in the WNBA draft. I mean, she pretty much is the hype of what Angel Reese was last year. Cardoso was absolutely dominant, 15 points, 17 rebounds. I watched this game, Thrift, and when Iowa jumped out to the 10-0 lead, and Caitlin Clark was just on fire, 18 points in that first quarter.
Yep.
But when I watched this game, I said to myself, even though I was pulling for Iowa because I wanted Caitlin Clark to get a NCAA championship, South Carolina was the better team. And in the fourth quarter, those shots were not falling for Caitlin Clark.
Right.
And I believe, even though she got her points, Caitlin Clark had 30 points, but South Carolina wore her down. And even though it was in single digits, those shots weren't falling for her. She needed her teammates like Stolke to step up. I mean, she stepped up in that UConn game. You also have Kate Martin, who had 16 points. But really, this has been the Caitlin Clark show. She is going to go down as one of the greatest college basketball players of all time. I think she's going to have a great WNBA career. This does not solidify her legacy as one of the greats. Yeah, it would be nice to win an NCAA championship, but Iowa is traditionally not a women's college basketball school like South Carolina is. Dawn Staley winning her third NCAA championship. I mean, she's got quite a distance. Gino Auriemma's got 11. But I think it's Dawn Staley runs the course and builds a factory at South Carolina. I see all these players like Michaela Johnson or Jabria Lindsay in our backyard that probably going to want to go play for her because Columbia, South Carolina is not too far down the road.
No, I'm with you, Richard. All right, a couple things. One, the fact that people are getting in heated debates about who the greatest of all time is and why Caitlin Clark is not is a good thing. We are talking women's basketball in debate shows and sports talk in general. That's big. And that a lot of it has to be credited to Caitlin Clark. She moved the needle. and help these conversations get started about women's athletics. And honestly, women's basketball has won the last 2 seasons over men's. When Coach K retired, remember that Duke UNC game, Richard? I mean, off the charts, ratings were, I mean, you couldn't write a better storyline to end his career. But since that moment, the college basketball landscape has been dominated by women's. And you know who the name is that is reason why that's been dominated? Richard? Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, it's Caitlin Clark. But I don't think it's just Caitlin Clark. I think it was the Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, heated trash talking last year. And that's why the LSU South Carolina Elite Eight game drew 14 million people. And then the UConn game, because UConn is a big brand, that drew 17 million. So we had the 2 most watched women's college basketball games of all time.
Yeah, well, and that game was incredible. I think Caitlin Clark lived up to the hype for sure. She is a phenomenal player that will be excellent at the WNBA. I don't think you can solidify the greatest college basketball players of all time by championships. That's hard to do because these are team championships. Very rarely do you see a player single-handedly take a team to a championship and win it. Danny Manning is what I'm thinking of as a one-person team. That is what Iowa became. Now, Stolke was great. I know Kate Martin had a really good Final Four against UConn. She had 16 tonight. 4 Iowa players and 4 South Carolina players were in double digits. It was the bench, though, for UConn because 2 of those came off the bench and had double digits. You mentioned one of them, freshman. Iowa had no bench, and that is credit to Don Saley and the depth. There is no comparing these rosters at all. I know Iowa upset South Carolina last year with a similar team, just like they beat LSU this year. But in a game of this magnitude and Don Saley getting a second chance at going at Caitlin Clark, Raven Johnson, who went 1 for 11, I think had the play of the tournament, in my opinion. She defensively wore down Caitlin. As hot as she got, it looked like it was about to be a 40-piece, and it looked like the Caitlin Clark, what she did against LSU, and they stopped that. They made the adjustments. I don't care about getting the debate who's the greatest of all time. I don't care if people ask, you put Caitlin Clark with LSU, do they win a championship, or who's your Mount Rushmore? The fact that we're having these conversations is what needs to be talked about, and the positivity of women's game being talked about, Richard. I don't care about the debates because those are not objective. They're subjective to your opinion of what makes a great player. But there is no denying the greatness of Caitlin Clark. She was phenomenal. But Dawn Staley, she literally has women's basketball by the neck. That was Gino. But I will say this, though, Richard. I think this is the best women's basketball's been in a long time when it comes to elite, talented players, star power. And Dawn Staley's got 3 of them in the last 6-7 years. Gino hasn't won one since 2016 when Breanna Stewart left after her senior year. All I'm saying is Don's doing it a little bit tougher than Eric. No credit taken away from Gino. But Pat's always going to be number 1 to me. Gino's a great coach. That play against UConn, it was the right call, man. Yeah. If you're the referee, especially the way Gabby sold it, even if you don't call it and she hits that game-winning shot, the conversations are still being talked about the no call. That play, there is no win, I feel like, Richard. If he doesn't call it, Iowa's pissed because they felt like that was an illegal screen. If it is called, UConn's like, how do you call that on a last-second play? Now it's up to the referees. Everybody's trashing this guy. But what would you have done, Rich? I don't know if I would have done anything different. I mean, it's a lose-lose. You're not getting away with anything. People are going to say you made the wrong call no matter what you did.
Thrift, I want to take you back to the Super Bowl 2 years ago when there was a questionable pass interference call on the Philadelphia Eagles that set up the game-winning field goal for the Kansas City Chiefs. And when I thought about that play, I'm not a fan of the refs deciding a game. I felt like this call right here in this moment decided the game, and Iowa ends up winning. But to be fair, as we look at the replay, I continue watching the replay on social media. That was an illegal screen. That clearly was the right call. It's just in that moment, I can understand why fans were upset because they don't want the refs to decide a game like that. But you're right. You got to make that call in that moment, especially with UConn down by one, having all the momentum because they stole the ball before. They didn't call a timeout. They want to go down the court to try to get the game-winning shot, and they possibly could. I mean, the percentages of them getting fouled on the play or putting up the game-winning shot, the game was on the line right there, and you got to just give credit it was an exciting game. I mean, you had superstar power with Caitlin Clark. You have Paige Buckers. It was just such a great, just phenomenal game, and that's why 17 million people watched it.
I said this last week, but in years past, I'm not making appointment viewing to watch women's basketball. If it's on the TV, Final Four, I'm going to watch it. This is different. And I think a lot of it has to do with the play and just elite level of high IQ basketball. South Carolina, UConn, LSU, even USC with Juju. I think there's a lot of great basketball players. And I was impressed, Richard. I really was. I think women's basketball definitely won this weekend for sure. And it's a good thing to see, and I'm looking forward to the future. Does the WNBA capitalize now on the conversations that are had about Caitlin Clark? Because she gets drafted, and she immediately starts playing here in like a month after she gets drafted. And during those summertime, it's just baseball. Like June and July, they need to dominate that. And hopefully with Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Plum, and the rest of the great WNBA players, that they'll ride the momentum, and I plan on watching some games. But South Carolina, you got to put this team now as one of the best teams to ever win it. They up there with the Tennessee team of 97-98. They went undefeated. Pick one of the 5 UConn teams have gone undefeated, and several others that have done it.
Texas in 1986.
But some incredible teams. But South Carolina puts up there, and credit to Dawn Staley. She's the best in the business right now. There is no questioning it. Even with Gino there, no one's doing it better than South Carolina and Dawn Staley. And honestly, I don't think it's going to stop. Cardoso's an excellent player. As I mentioned, Raven Johnson, the freshman who's going to be an elite player. She put up 19. Can't wait to see after a summer of putting things together. But from start to finish, they were the best. Caitlin Clark moved the needle. Great season for women's basketball, and South Carolina are the champions. Caitlin Clark, definitely one of the top 5 greatest players of all time. She's top 3 in my opinion. Taking Iowa to back-to-back natties, that's impressive, Richard.
And by the way, great basketball talent in the state of Georgia. We know about Maya Moore going to Collins Hill. Raven Johnson went to Westlake. She's from Atlanta. So just a big shout out to just Georgia basketball in general.
All right, coming up, literally, I would say, Richard, in about an hour and a half at 9 o'clock. That's another thing, too, the women's did I think, a good job. I don't know why it wasn't in prime time, other than maybe ESPN wanted to capitalize on some NBA games, and they're like, you know what, let's hit this at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Didn't understand it why they did it that way. I would have had it prime time. They're not competing really with anything right now. Just move the NBA games out. You see on tomorrow, there is no NBA games for the for the men's national championship, but the men's playing at 9 o'clock at night. Come on. Don't staying up that late. No, and then at least now there's a good storyline because last year was trash. No one cared about the Final Four or the national championship. This year's going to be different because Zach Edey is trying to do something with Purdue that had happened since Virginia when a number 1 lost to a 16, and then the next year won a national championship. They got elite shooters in Smith and Jones. They got good wing depth, but honestly, it is run through Edey. He had 40 against Tennessee, had another 30, and dominated DJ Burns. He's just been phenomenal. But as good as Purdue is, and as great as a story, and I'm finally capitalizing on being a Painter fan, even though I jumped off the bandwagon. The guy's a great coach. This is Purdue's best opportunity to win a national title. When you watch UConn, that's a well-oiled machine. Every read is the right pass. Everybody knows every position on the floor. They're always setting screens. They're always moving. And you got elite players like Cam Spencer that can pull up and knock down shots. Trey Newton. You got guys like Stephon Castle who will come off the bench and give you 20. And then you got a guy in the only team that can match up Purdue with someone that can go move for move and athleticism with them. Not height, but athleticism with them, and is over 7 foot. That's Donovan Clingan. So UConn has no weaknesses. I think it's going to be close, Richard, and I think it's going to be great basketball to watch. But in the end, UConn's depth, their athleticism, they're going to wear down the wings. They're going to allow Zach Edey to just dominate in the paint because they're not going to want anybody else to hit threes to open up. And they'll say, Zach, you can get your 40. We'll beat you 80 to 50. Everybody else is going to have 10 points. And they have the defense to do that. Alabama kept it in there. And credit to Nate Oates and Mark Spears and the Alabama Crimson Tide for a great season. And honestly, this is the closest UConn's been held deep into a second half in the last 2 NCAA tournaments. So credit to them. Purdue will do the same thing, but then down the stretch, I think UConn ends up winning this like 80 to, 68, something like that. And UConn goes back-to-back, just like the Florida 06-07. And honestly, this team is just as deep and loaded. And I may even take this UConn team over Florida. And, Richard, that's blasphemy from someone that's believing that 06-07 Florida team with Lee Humphrey, Torrin Green, Corey Brewer, Noah, Horford. I mean, just elite talent. That was always one of my favorite teams. They had shooting. They had wing depth, 2 big guys. But, man, this UConn team, they're deep. They're coached well. I honestly think this is one of the best teams we've seen in a long time, and I don't think Purdue's going to be able to beat them. What about you?
I think UConn ends up winning. They win back-to-back titles. They win their 6th national championship since 1999.
And you can't say fluke, Richard, because
it's not. This is not a fluke. Overall number 1 seed, and they have dominated everybody in the tournament. And they don't have Jordan Hawkins this year. They're doing it with different guys. Donovan Clingan has been absolutely incredible. I mean, you have Castle coming off the bench. I mean, he's projected to be a lottery pick.
Come on, man.
I mean, and what's impressive is that this is their 3rd head coach to win a national title. You have Jim Calhoun winning titles. You had Kevin Ollie winning titles, and then Dan Hurley winning titles. I mean,
Unreal.
They're a blue blood. You can now say that UConn is a blue blood.
Can I tell you something that's going to blow your mind, Richard?
Yeah.
If UConn wins this, let me make sure I say this. Let me make sure I'm going to calculate in my head. Boom, boom, boom. Yes, if UConn wins this, they will have more national championships than North Carolina. North Carolina, it's been to more Final Fours than anyone. They've been to 20 Final Fours. They only got 2 national titles. One with the Michael Jordan shot with Dean Smith, and then again when they had the timeout fiasco against the Fab Five of Michigan. Those are only 2 he got. Then Roy Williams won it in 05, 09, and again in 17. That's 3. That's 5 national championships total for North Carolina. I may not be correct. I may gonna have to go look and see did anybody win a national title before Dean Smith. But even if my points is wrong in that aspect, I'm right in this. They are definitely a blue blood, Richard. Winning 6 national titles. You win multiple. You have over 3 or 4. You got to be a blue blood. Am I right, Richard?
You're right. They would be tied with North Carolina because North Carolina won one in 57.
Okay, so they did have one more. Still, tied with them. You got to put them as a blue blood.
Oh, absolutely.
Duke's got, I think, 5 under Coach K. UCLA's got their 11. Kentucky's got their close to 9 or 10. But, Dan Hurley, he's same thing. Unless the NBA comes calling, which they could, other than Calipari getting fired, which could happen, those are the only 2 options, I think. A good NBA situation or Kentucky. That's the only jobs Dan Hurley's leaving UConn for. And in my head, I'm thinking, why even leave Kentucky? You're getting everything you need at UConn. You're winning back-to-back national titles. They've won more national titles. Remember, they won their first in 1999, Richard.
I do remember that. Khalid El-Amin, Rip Hamilton.
You remember that team. And
Yeah.
so let's just start from there. That 99 season until now, UConn's got 6 national championships. Kentucky's got 1. The year, if you want to start the year before 97-98, Tubby Smith won a national championship with Kentucky. You want to start that year? Still, you can start that season. Heck, you can even go back to when Rick Pitino won in 95-96. That would be 3 for Kentucky, and that's still 6 for UConn. So I say that to say UConn's going to win tonight, but it's a good game, good storylines, and I'm looking forward to watching it. Unlike last year, 2 number 1 seeds, 2 behemoths going at each other, 2 elite guards in Smith and Newton. I can't wait, man. It's going to be a lot of fun. But again, I expect UConn to win the national championship. All right, let's move on, and let's talk now Auburn spring football game. Richard, how about this? I tell you, I was not a believer in Peyton Thorne at all. But the confidence that is oozing from that staff about him because of receivers like Cam Coleman from Central Product, maybe if you get talent around him and your offensive coordinator's not working against him, who knows? Maybe Peyton Thorne can be a formidable quarterback, a top 5, 6 quarterback in the SEC and help you win 9 or 10 games and help get that winning culture back in Auburn. You can't take a lot away from the spring game and spring practice, Richard. I mean, come on. I mean, they're setting them up to be successful.
Right.
I saw some bright spots, and obviously the guy that sold the show is Cam Coleman.
There's no question about that. 4 receptions, 92 yards, and a touchdown. The former Central Red Devil, which we met at the Sports Vision's Football Awards luncheon. He's a big guy. He's a possession receiver. I think that he is going to have a huge impact year 1 in Auburn. And really, when was the last time Auburn had an NFL-ready wide receiver? Because I believe that this player, if everything plays well, I mean, he's going to be one of those receivers that is probably going to play in the NFL someday. I mean, he's going to be that good. I mean, I'm excited to see Cam Coleman out on the Plains. And the season just can't get here earlier enough. I mean, they play Alabama A&M in their opener. But, you know, the spring game, you know, there's some good takeaways. One takeaway, the Auburn High kicker, Towns McHugh. We talked about him like he was perfect 7 for 7 on extra points. I mean, actually on field goals. He was kicking field goals. They found their kicker. I mean, he could boot 55-yard field goals. He played for Auburn High. I mean, he had some big kicks in high school, and he's staying right there in Auburn. He's going to be kicking for the Auburn Tigers.
He was pretty cool to be able to hit that, man. A walk-on, you know, that's always cool when walk-ons are getting that notoriety, and usually the walk-on guys that are getting playing time are most of the time kickers like Towns McHugh. But some bright spots, as you mentioned, Cam Coleman, the receiving core they put on a show. Cam Coleman's going to be the real deal if he doesn't get injured. We'll knock on wood. And they get him the ball, which I think they're going to try to. I think he'll have a great freshman year, and we're going to see a bright future for the Auburn Tigers. And, again, Ken Alston, the quarterback's coach now, he said a lot of great things about Peyton Thorne, and he said we didn't put him in positions to be successful. And maybe this year, different outcome, because I'm telling you, not a big believer. I wasn't a big believer in him. Was surprised Auburn didn't go in the recruiting. I mean, the transfer portal to get a quarterback, but they think highly of him. They like their freshman quarterbacks that came in and giving them a year to develop. I think it was a good spring for Auburn. I really do. I think it was a good spring for Hugh Freeze, who needs it, who's not on the hot seat, but if he has another bad year, he will be after year 2. So he knows he needs to win and put in the right direction. But I think a really good spring game. Good show out. DJ was there. He had an awesome time. You can listen to DJ's opinion on that on the Sports Vision radio show we just did. So go look on the Facebook page right now or download the Sports Vision's radio app. But any other final thoughts talking about the Auburn spring game, Richard?
Well, I'm just excited that we're now in the month of April where we have a ton of spring games. And we got the Alabama and Georgia spring game coming up this Saturday. Yeah. And then Georgia State as well. Yeah, so we'll talk. I know we're going to Auburn and Georgia, Alabama and Georgia, looking forward to seeing Kalen DeBoer. Again, you don't learn too much from them other than just some spot. I think the main thing is, like, who stood out. And obviously the biggest person that stood out in the Auburn spring game
was Cam Coleman. Again, good turnout, and we're hoping positive things for the Hugh Freeze Auburn Tigers. All right, Richard, what everybody's been waiting on. High school baseball ratings. Let's go. Throw them up there. The number 10 team, who is just having an off year, man. Tough schedule, but just things have just not aligned right for them. They're 10-14. They didn't have a great spring break, Richard. They went 0-2, and they move all the way down to number 10. Still have the chance to host a playoff game. Got region play coming up here in the next few weeks. Losing to Thomasville didn't help. They're aiming for the number 2 seed, which they can do. But Columbus at number 10. And Shaw, 9-11. Again, expect to make the playoffs. Maybe can host a game. But we expect, I'm going to be honest, expected a little bit better records from both these teams. But that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Shaw and Columbus at 9 and 10.
Yeah, and you talk about Columbus. I mean, they did lose 2 region games. They are currently 4-2 in the region. Thomasville and Crisp County still undefeated. Columbus has got to play Crisp County next. And right now, it looks like they're going to be locked in for that number 3 seed, so they're probably going to go on the road. How about the Shaw Raiders taking 2 out of 3 against Bainbridge? Bainbridge is one of the top teams in their region. They already swept Hardaway, and they did lose to Cairo, but they're going to play Westover. I think that Shaw, once again, could host a playoff game like they did last season. So I think that Shaw is on the up and coming.
Harris County 8-12. Again, they started 1-8. Since then, they are 7-4. They're getting better each and every week. And 8-12. We got a huge. They play Opelika today. We'll get that score. We'll talk about that on Wednesday. But they play Drew, a 3-game series. Expect them to sweep that one. And then they got a big one against McIntosh. If they can beat 2 or 3 from McIntosh, they'll be winning the region. How about that? A team that started 1-8, the winner region. I think Coach Dimitri's done an excellent job. And again, they're a young team. Their JV team's loaded. They're going to have a bright future. But at number 8, but the surprise team of the year is the Jordan Red Jackets, 10-7. We hope that Coach Lang will be able to make the playoffs this year. Richard, you're doing that Kendrick Jordan game tomorrow. It will be a lot of fun. How about the Red Jackets coming in at number 7? Top 7 for Jordan.
Yeah, and 7-4 in their region. They are currently in 3rd place behind Ace Charter and Rutland. Rutland has a 9-1 record. Their only loss was to Jordan. So if Jordan can get a couple of wins over Kendrick, and Kendrick is still fighting for a playoff spot. They're 2-9 in the region. So this is a big region game for the Kendrick Cherokees as well. As a Jordan swept Northeast, Southwest is only 2 games behind them.
Yep.
And I think that Jordan, once again, could make the playoffs in back-to-back years.
Number 6, Smith Station. They beat Auburn. They look like Smith Station and Opelika are going to be the teams fighting for that number 2 spot. And I think Smith Station probably going to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They come in at number 6, and I think Smith Station is going to make the playoffs again, and maybe the Final 4 or semifinals. But Smith Station had a good week, and I expect them to have a good week this week as they take on Opelika. A big series. Really could decide who wins that number 2 in their area. And they're number 6. Any thoughts on them, Richard?
Yeah, and Smith Station has a big one next week against Central. So they got to get past Opelika. Central plays Auburn. I mean, this region is just absolutely crazy. All these teams can make the playoffs, and only 2 of them are going to go.
Number 5, the Calvary Christian Knights. So they had a tough week in last Saturday when they went 0-4 against Pacelli and LaGrange. But they bounced back because they hadn't played in 10 days and then went and played 4 games in, 3 days or 2 days. And went 2-2 against some really good at the IMG Academy Classic that's got teams from all over the country. They went 2-2, Richard. They're 15-5, and I don't think they're going to lose another game the rest of this season. And if that happens, they're going to move up into the top 2 because you know what that means? They would beat Glenwood at Glenwood and then beat Brookstone at home. But Pacelli has their number, man. It's going to be tough for me to put them over Pacelli even with they have better records. That Glenwood game's going to be big, but Calvary at number 5, they had a good week. They may be moving up. They have a good week this week. But number 4, I told you about Glenwood. They've been getting better, hitting. They're playing their best baseball. They're 11-6. Did they beat Deerfield Windsor, Richard?
Yes, they did. They swept Deerfield Windsor.
Now they're 11-6, and they got a big one against Calvary. Glenwood started slow, and now they're hitting their stride and looking to win their 24th state championship. Thift, he's trying to get one for every finger now, Richard, Coach Fannin. And they last year of the AISA, Glenwood and Calvary at 4-5. What you got for me?
Well, Glenwood, they took 2 out of 3 against Lee Scott Academy. If you look at their region, they still got to play Springwood. They're going to play Southern Prep Academy. And I don't know if they're going to play Valiant Cross Academy, but as they get ready for the AISA playoffs for the final time, Coach Fanning's going to have them ready. This team is going to be right there at the end. Macon East is a little bit down. This was the team they beat in the championship last year. I think they're going to end up playing Lee Scott Academy in the baseball championship. But Springwood is good too. That's a team they could face in the semifinals.
All right. So how about this, Richard? We had the Glenwood Lee Scott State Championship in football. We almost had a Glenwood Lee Scott State Championship basketball. We had a Glenwood Lee Scott semifinal last year, and we had in the Final Four, in basketball. But this year, we potentially are going to have a Glenwood Lee Scott State Championship baseball. We're going to be signed. Sign us up for that one, please.
Yes.
We'll be there for that Glenwood Lee Scott State Championship for sure. They come in at number 4. I think the team that has really put everybody on notice is Pacelli. They're 14-4. They have won 7 straight games, Richard. Since losing to Brookstone, they have beaten teams like Calvary, Westfield, and they're playing excellent baseball. They got a good week coming up this week as well, Richard, don't they? I think they play Strong Rock Christian, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to try to see if I can pull that up.
Yeah, they'll play Strong Rock Christian the 22nd and 23rd. They actually will play St. Mary's Academy this week. That's a region game. And then they play Heritage. Yeah, so Heritage is another good school.
Next week, be at Heritage. We'll be there for that one. We won't see Pacelli this week, but I expect Pacelli to be 16-4. And we talked about Glenwood Lee Scott State Championship. Pacelli could be building this next team for a state championship, and the Brookstone Cougars 17-3. They didn't play a game all spring break. Coach Greg Mathis said they just want a week off, let them recuperate. They've been playing great baseball, and now they're going to get back at it. In a couple weeks, they'll be taking on Calvary. Richard, we'll be there not this week, but next week. They got a big one. And I think who do they take on, Richard?
They take on Heritage, and then they take on Strong Rock Christian before the finale of the regular season against Calvary on the 23rd of April. And then the first round of the GIAA playoffs start on April 29th.
Yeah, so they take on Heritage this week. We won't be able to catch them on that one because it is on the 9th. But next week, we plan on maybe getting Strong Rock Christian because they're an excellent baseball team. So we may get them then, Brookstone, and for sure the Calvary game. And then the number 1 team in not only our ratings, but the number 1 team in the country, the Central Red Devils. They obliterated Opelika. They've won 18 straight games since losing to Mill Creek back on March the 2nd. Coach Keogh's team is, everybody talks about the Russell County team. It was a great team a few years back. Columbus was ranked nationally too. I'm putting this Central team up there with any of them, with all of them, man.
Oh, absolutely.
And if this pace continues, which I find it hard to believe they're not going to lose one more game, especially when they take on Bob Hope, who's also ranked in the top 4. But if they go all season with only losing 1 game, they're the greatest high school team, I think, in the country in the last 20 years. And Coach Keogh, man, he's got his eyes on state championship for sure. That's the main thing he wants, but maybe even national championship too. They come in at number 1.
Coach Kehoe has got just a fantastic team with college prospects everywhere. He was talking about, that huge series against Opelika. Where one of those games they won 15-2.
Right.
And in Opelika, he said, they have 4 pitchers that are going to play at the next level. They have some pretty decent pitchers, and they put up 15 runs on the Opelika Bulldogs team that has a very good record. They look like a team that could make the playoffs, and in a normal year, they would make the playoffs, but they just happen to be in the same region with Central, Smith Station, and Auburn. They got a big one. This is a rivalry game against Auburn this Wednesday at Central, and then at Auburn on Thursday. And then next week, they play Smith Station. So Central right now, 29-1. After beating Troup County over the weekend, Central is just firing on all cylinders. Their only loss was to 7A Mill Creek out of Georgia.
Yeah, but look at all the wins they got, Richard, against top-level talent from all over the country.
Oh, yeah. Saraland, I mean, they beat LaGrange. I mean,
well, that was a great game. And if I'm LaGrange, I'm holding my head up high. Coach Donnie Branch. LaGrange looking to try to avenge their back-to-back state championship losses. But here's our top 10. We hope to get Central in this week. We're already getting Glenwood Calvary. We're getting Jordan Kendrick. And I think that's it. We got CVCC. And then next week, we got Harris County taking on McIntosh. We got who was the other one? Brooks. I went Brooks home, but Pacelli taking on Heritage. It was a game April the 18th. I think it's Calvary Troup County we plan on hitting. So got some big games coming up. Looking forward to that. And then, of course, the playoffs start right after. All right, Richard, you can take that off the screen. We want to say thank y'all to everyone that made this possible. That includes Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube. Got a busy week. Again, tomorrow, Richard, you're going to be there. Kendrick and Jordan. Is it at Jordan?
It's at Kendrick.
I was trying to give Jordan some love at there.
Oh, yeah.
But we'll be there for that one Wednesday. Potentially Central Auburn, but we will have the Georgia Alabama Sports Live show regardless. If we do a game, if we do, we're going to do it later on that night. If we don't, we'll still do it around that time. Thursday, CVCC baseball doubleheader, 12-3, and then me and Richard doing Calvary Glenwood at 6. Friday, we got the Columbus Lions playing, and you'll get the pregame show on Friday, and then Saturday, CVCC softball doubleheader, and then we start over and do it all again next week too, Richard. We're going to do a show. Richard's going to be out of town for drill, but we'll be doing a virtual show at least once with Richard sometime next week, whether it be Sunday or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll see when he's available. And then, Richard, you'll be back in the grind the 19th as you go out of town the 12th. So thank y'all to everybody that tuned in today. Like us, subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow for Kendrick Jordan right here on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. Thank you for watching the Georgia Alabama Sports Live Show presented by Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC. You're ready to smile.